I'm going to introduce you to a section called How Not to Kill Your Bandmates. I was in a band for 8 years. After 8 years of living with the same 3 people, it gets a little bit tricky because you would quite happily kill them in their sleep or stick a fork in their eye whilst they're driving, knowing it might take you out as well, but it's worth it. Tip number 1, make sure you are healthy. If you are in a band and you are touring, you spend time very, very close to each other, getting on each other's nerves. Now, one thing you can do is eat healthy on the road and sleep as much as you can, because you're in for late nights. There's a lot of late nights, traveling on the road this far away from each other. So eating healthy and sleeping as much as you can stops the grouchiness. So the first thing I would say when I'm in a band with someone is eat healthy. Don't eat at service stations. You know that thing where you stop at service stations? We did today. Imagine if you're doing that 3 or 4 or 5 times a week and you're literally going, what can I eat? A Ginster's pasty and a relentless energy drink. Because at 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to feel awesome. And who's standing right next to me? The guitarist, who's been standing next to me for 8 years. Tip number 2, avoid hot topics. Now the reason for this is because, again, you are with each other so much. So if you're talking about hot topics, oh, no he didn't, all of a sudden, things get a little bit frayed. It starts off really fun and really exciting, and you're like, oh, Donald Trump or Brexit or that kind of stuff. The problem is you might not all have the same views, and it can quickly turn, especially when people haven't eaten properly and they get a bit grumpy. So avoiding hot topics. We used to have a thing, that was me, we used to have a thing in the band where one of the guys didn't like football. He hated football. So we avoided talking about football. It was nice. So it's just a way to remember that you are in a very confined space with your bandmates for a very long time. Potentially years. Don't forget, this is a career decision you're making. Imagine if you're Metallica or the Rolling Stones. They've been doing this for decades, literally decades. Tip number 3. This is very important. I suggest you all write it down. Don't forget this. Bring your earplugs. Why should you bring your earplugs? Snoring. Because someone in the band will snore like a real snorer. That's happened to me on every band I've ever been in. And you don't get separate rooms, because nowadays when you go on tour, you are trying to keep all the costs down as much as possible. 3 guys to a room. 3 guys as close to you as they have been in a van all day. I want to play you something right now. This is me. Just listen to this.
That is inward and outward snoring at the same time. I thought he was sucking the air out of the room. So yeah, that was at 3 o'clock in the morning when we just got to sleep. So Morgan, your boy. Yeah, so we're a bit tired.
I've not had a great night's sleep.
So that was 3 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't sleep, so I got my phone and I recorded it. It was literally like some end-level guardian from a computer game had just broken through the floor and was trying to eat me. And so I would suggest bringing your earplugs to the point where I've slept in a bath. Anyone slept in a bath? It's really uncomfortable. Sleeping in a bath because people snore is very difficult. Next, remember that the feeling is mutual. You might hate your bandmates, but I promise you they probably hate you too. So effectively, remembering that helps, because as you are frustrated, ready to lash out with a gun, they're probably thinking the same thing. So always be prepared to take some responsibility that maybe it's on both sides. Tip number 5, creativity. How many people have been on tour? Good few of you. You know that thing which I always tell people, when you're on the road, consistency is key. So you make a show, you don't make a set. The problem with that is it loses creativity over time. And we are creatives. I don't know about you guys, but if I don't get to be creative, then it drives me a little bit stir crazy. So I'm always looking at ways to be creative, whether it's whilst playing bass, whether it's changing certain things around on set lists or on songs. But to be fair, if I don't do this, I go a little bit crazy and it's Groundhog Day. Anyone seen the film Groundhog Day? Effectively, you wake up and you have the same thing, which is effectively what touring can be. Because you wake up, you have breakfast, you get in a van, you travel, you get to the venue, you do a sound check, you wait and wait, you do a gig, you pack up, you go home. You wake up, you do exactly the same again. And it's amazing fun. I mean, I cannot tell you how privileged I feel to be a musician. Like, it's crazy when I look at what my friends from school are doing, and I'm like, you should see this shit I'm doing. I'm in a van with my mates, but it can be a little bit samey. So creativity very much helps. Number 6, plan and prepare fun journey chats. Okay, so coming up with ideas that you can actually talk about and do to keep the mood light. The mood light. So one thing we used to do is who's ever played the game Would You Rather? Brilliant, isn't it? Whilst the hour's away. We came up with one which I want you guys to actually answer now, okay? If you had to delete one decade of music from the 1960s to 2010, we haven't finished after that, so we can't comment after that. The 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the noughties, which would you get rid of? Yeah, everyone's got an opinion now, haven't they? It's really, really tough. So if you're looking at the 60s, which was my answer, I'd get rid of the 60s. Yeah, I could hear people going, oh! But I know, you get rid of the Beatles, I get it, and all of the rest of the great things. But the problem is I can't get rid of the 90s because I listen to Rage Against the Machine probably every breakfast. And then in the 2000s is probably the most music that I listen to because for me the Kerrang generation was there. 70s, can't get rid of the 70s. So that was my conclusion. This went on, this didn't go on for like 20 minutes, right? This went on for 2 weeks between 3 guys in the van. Right, I'm having to think about it. I've decided, Andy, you can't get rid of the 80s because Van Halen. That would be it. And then we discussed that. We were driving from Brighton to Derby discussing it, and then all the way home again. Went on for 2 weeks. Hugs. Yeah, I love hugs. So we had a rule in the band, which is whatever happens, we'd always end the gig with a hug, even when we wanted to kill each other. When we met up and we hadn't seen each other for a few days, hug, and we'd always finish the gig with a hug and a thank you. And it sounds so dumb, but when you've been in the same confined, it's like prison sometimes, where you've been in the same confined space with 2 or 3 guys. Can you imagine, you know, when you haven't seen your friends for a few days and you say, hey, how's your week been? You can't say that because your week's been with them in a van. So you can't say, how's your week? Well, I was with you, you dickhead. That doesn't work. So effectively, all the conversations run out. How's, oh, no, what have you, oh no, that doesn't work. All of a sudden, you're trying to think of things to say. So it gets very tense sometimes. But a hug always does the trick. Tip number 8, remind yourself of the goals that you're working on. This to me is not just in a band, this is across life. I want you guys right now to think about, what is it that you're working towards? What is it that you want? And right now, if that is world domination, which for me, it always is world domination, that's fine. That's what you're working towards. If it's to make money at music, that's fine. But there's a big thing, which is or more importantly, where you want to get to and how you want to do it. And if you have that goal in mind of where it is that you want to get to, it becomes so much easier to start to working towards it. Because so many musicians I talk to, I call this the motorway analogy, so many musicians I talk to, I ask them, what is it that you want to do? And they say, oh, you know, if I could just make a living from music. And I say, yeah, cool, that's fine. But what is it that you really want? This is a long career. What do you want? And they go, to tour the world and be a superstar musician. I go, great, that's what we want to do. And then I say, what are you doing to get to that level? And they say, well, I'm teaching from home, and I'm in a covers band, and I'm in 4 bands where I'm kind of the higher end bass player. And I say, but can you see what you're trying to achieve compared to the path that you're going? And the equivalent is, we're in Bath. Now we came here from Brighton. The way to get to Brighton, the main motorway is the M4. So if I said, I want to get to Bath, someone would say, you want to go on the M4. If I said, no, yeah, I do want to go to Bath, but I want to go on the M6. You'd say, oh, you're going to end up in Manchester. And you go, yeah, that's a problem, isn't it? No, I want to go to Bath. They go, fine, M4. I do want to go on the M6. That is what musicians are doing every day. This is what I want to do. This is where I want to get to. This is what I want to achieve. But this is where I'm heading with the decisions I'm making. So keeping that in mind, this idea of what is it that we're working towards, it brings everyone in the band together. You're fighting for the same thing. You know, we are working towards, I need you to understand this, we are working in, outside of sport, probably the toughest industry. It's very competitive. We are working towards the privileged life. To be able to pick up a guitar or a microphone and sing, and to do this, to get paid for it, and to do this as a living, this is a massive privilege. And I can promise you, it's a fun life. It's bloody brilliant. Don't take it for granted, because it's amazing. But you're going to have to fight for this. Number 9, spend time apart. Now, obviously, you are in a band, you're in a van quite a lot, or a bus, might be a tour bus, might be on a plane. But I would always recommend having some time apart, so that you can actually, A, take in some culture, or take in something else other than the same 3 people that you've been with, and actually have some time doing something on tour. We would always push people away and say, look, let's go and I'm going to go for a walk, or I'm going to go into town and have a look, rather than the same people doing the same things again and again and again. Because if you don't, again, you just go a little bit stir crazy. And this is what happens. And lastly, stay clean. And I don't mean drugs clean. Don't do drugs. I'm talking actual clean. You know, like smelly. Because when you're in a band with what are your best friends, when somebody hasn't had a shower or a bath, it's the worst, or cleaned their teeth, because you are usually this close. Look at that. What's that? It's about, I don't know, 12 inches? No, that's literally here, right there. And when they turn and go, how are you? Stinks. So staying clean is the biggest way not to fight, because it's going to be a long drive with someone who isn't clean. Thank you so much for having me.